Sutta 5. The Sutta of the First Self. Thus have I heard, spoken in the hush between sensing and knowing, as life grew more intricate and nervous systems wove themselves into patterns of response, another unfolding began, subtle, unseen, and destined to shape the world of experience. It was here, disciples, in creatures that did not think, in beings without language, in organisms without awareness, that the first traces of self appeared. Not a self that says, I am, nor a self that clings or fears, but a quiet architecture, a set of functions that allowed living bodies to hold together amid changing conditions. Life had learned to sense. Now it learned to predict, to move toward what helped and away from what harmed, to stabilize the internal even as the external shifted. This was not yet identity. It was regulation. A body that could anticipate had advantage. A body that could compare past signals with present ones could survive more reliably. A body that could remember could endure scarcity and seek abundance. Thus arose the first self-like process, a pattern that tracked the boundary between organism and world. Not a true boundary, but a useful one. Not a self in essence, but a self in function. Understand this well. The first self was not consciousness. It was a balancing of forces, a pulse of signals sustaining a living form, a map that helped the organism remain organized, a set of reactions that preferred continuation over collapse. This mapping grew more refined through the long patience of evolution. Some beings developed simple circuits that linked sensation to response. Some developed networks that compared one moment with the next. Some developed patterns that predicted what would come. Still, no mind. Still, no ego. Still, no ignorance. There was nothing yet to be ignorant of. Only adaptive illusion. The illusion of an inside and an outside, of a thing that must endure, of a center that must be protected. This illusion was not a mistake. It was a necessity. For organisms that could not distinguish between self and other did not survive long enough to become our ancestors. Thus the earlier self was a strategy, not a truth, a model, not a possessor, a temporary scaffold erected by natural pressures, and from this scaffold the later house of consciousness would one day be built. As nervous systems grew more complex, they learned not only to sense but to integrate, not only to react but to choose among reactions, not only to anticipate but to shape anticipation itself. Here the self-model deepened. A reference point emerged, a locus for action and evaluation, a pivot around which behavior could turn. Yet still, disciples, no I, no identity, no story, no reflection, only an ever-improving illusion that this body is separate from that world, that these signals belong to this organism, that survival depends on maintaining the difference. This was the first self, not a metaphysical entity, but a biological pattern, a process of narrowing the vastness of reality into a manageable image so that life could continue. In time, after millions upon millions of generations, rebirths, this self-model would grow capable of awareness. Awareness would grow capable of reflection. Reflection would grow capable of error. error would grow into ignorance, ignorance into craving, craving into the entire chain that binds beings to suffering. Yet in the beginning, this first self was innocent. It knew nothing. It sought nothing. It simply regulated, persisted, and adapted. A humble root from which the great tree of consciousness would later rise, with all its fruit of joy and trouble. Thus understand the self is older than thought, older than fear, older than desire. It is woven into the fabric of life as structure, not truth, as function, not essence. And because it is not essence, because it is constructed, temporary, conditional, it can be seen through. And because it can be seen through, freedom is possible. This is the sutta of the first self, the teaching that the seeds of identity were planted long before mind appeared, and that what we now mistake as I began as nothing more than the universe's way of allowing life to hold together amid impermanence.